Well, Dr. Shari Andrews, welcome to the Chundria Show. How are you today?
I am blessed, extremely blessed. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get started. My first question for you is, what led to your work helping women embrace emotional wellness and self-leadership?
I think, like most, it comes from personal experience. Basically, knowing what I've gone through, the struggle behind the scenes, inspired me to want to inspire others, but also for the well-being of others. As a physician, that's been my life's mantra: is not only to educate, but to make sure that we're caring for others as well in the most genuine way. So I would say that that was the driving factor and driving force.
Sure. Now, you speak often about the power of presence. What does that look like in your everyday life?
Presence, what more can you offer is what I would say. It's basically you have to own and have that personal invitation to be who you actually are. And once I realized, when I began to be open and honest and not shameful, is when I realized that the real work began. So, I discussed this idea of the hourglass, and the hourglass, as we know in the way it's shaped, it's childhood, where we are in the middle, and then as we are when we are older. And as a child, you're free spirited. You don't care what anyone thinks. You'll want to go to the grocery store with a tiara on. And you don't care because you don't think anyone's watching, and it's what you want to do. It's a genuine presence, right? But then when we become in our middle part of the years, it's when shame comes in and we start to wonder and worry what others feel. And I'm here to see if we can shatter that middle portion of the hourglass. Because when you get older, what happens again? You don't care anymore. It's like, I've lived and I've done it all. And what do I have to lose? But really, we should live in that power and presence right now. What do we have to lose? Yeah.
You said a word, you said shame. Sometimes we live in that shame. So how can women begin to release that need for perfection as they pursue their own healing, if you're on a healing journey?
I mean, I grew up in a Caribbean household, and the way my mom especially would say, it's like, don't tell everybody your business. You sort of keep things to yourself, or keep it within the household. But honestly, shame to me was me not feeling open and able enough to feel like I was enough, to feel like I could be open and honest with those around me, feeling like maybe I'm too much. Maybe saying to myself that, if I were really strong, then I wouldn't feel the way that I do. And I feel like that in and of itself can hold us down in many, many ways. And so when I let go of shame and I started telling the truth and realizing that it's not only releasing me and releasing the weight that I have on my shoulders, but it's allowing others to exhale, that vulnerability is what invites others to do the same. And that's empowering. So I certainly have made that sort of my new mission, is to be vulnerable, to have others be seen, and for others to sort of exhale, let it out.
Sure. I know you're a medical doctor, but two questions. What's your specialty, and when did you develop a deep affinity for empowering women?
So my specialty is emergency medicine. So I can work in an emergency department, urgent care. I can do private practice, but I live in the ER. So we handle everything that comes through the door, and literally that could be everything. So it's like, a Jane of all trades, if you will, within medicine.
When did you develop the affinity to empower women?
Yeah, I think it's when I became a mom. And then I realized the struggles that I was going through. There were many, many good times, but there were times when I literally would sit by myself at night and feel, I would say, depressed. I was high functioning, but sad. And I felt like maybe there was more. And once I realized that, when I began to open up about that, is when, again, when you start to become vulnerable and you see the true responses of other women behind, coming at you, wow, I feel the same way. And because you spoke, I felt like I was open to do that. I got to let go of that ego, not the ego of arrogance, but the ego of protection, me trying to smile harder, work longer, and do more. And I think that's the pivoting moment is when I became a mom, and I found myself in the situation that I was in as a single mom, And once I became open about that, I realized that helps other women to be seen, me being open about my lived experiences. And that's truly when it all began.
You said you were high functioning. You had a high functioning sadness, which I think a lot of people can relate to because we just go through the motion sometimes. Like you're carrying the burden, you're carrying the weight, you're carrying the responsibility, and especially for someone in your profession, you're carried away in the world every time you clock in and out of the work. You don't know what's going to come through the door, and that's really admirable that you chose that as a profession. Just medicine and generally speaking, but then that you use your life's work to also empower and encourage women. Do you feel like when you were high functioning, although you had that sadness, did it challenge your identity at all?
Absolutely. It made me really question, like, what am I doing? I literally found myself in a rut, like a very mundane lifestyle, home and work, mom and work, like just going home to my child, figuring it out there, and then getting off to work. And that's not how my life was before that. Before that, I was into car racing and modeling and doing fashion shows. And I was even part of a TV show on a small network that was local to Brooklyn. I could have listed so many things that I would have done. People knew like Shari for being outside, and I'm an introverted type of person. But once I took on these two new roles that were pretty much at the same time, becoming a new doctor and becoming a new mom, literally within 6 weeks of each other, is when I realized that things sort of just came to a screeching halt. And that was the moment that basically that cycle that I was in, that vortex that I was in, me realizing I needed to come out of that. And yes, I was functioning well as a resident. I was doing my very best. Yes, as a mom, I was doing my very best as well. And I kudos to myself, because with my support system, I was able to pull through that. But again, when those times came where I sat at home to myself, I began to realize, like, yes, I'm going through the motions, but is this really who I want to be? Am I really embodying all the things that I know I'm capable of? And that's when I began to do a little bit more of soul searching. I found God, I found fitness, I found fashion. And then things started to be born again. I got into fashion so much that I started a fashion boutique. I started to write and blog about commonly seen healthcare things, just delivering information in teeny doses to the community. I founded a fitness platform where not only was I enjoying fitness for myself, but bringing that fitness, wellness, and health to others. And then now with a new book that my debut book called Find Your Pulse, is sort of like encompassing all of those things. And now I feel like my cup is filling, it's no longer that vortex that I was in, but now it's me being so open and honest that I'm seeing how much it's helping others. It's now like a drug, and I just want to keep delivering. A good one, though, a good drug.
When you were writing that book, what did you hope the takeaway would be for your readers? Or was it kind of therapeutic for you to write, to get that out, and then now this is like your gift to the world? Or did you have intent in mind for your reader?
It was both. And not only was it cathartic to just write, it was also reflective. It made me sit back and not only retell my story, but I could now reanalyze it. And that's the power of journaling. If we journal, we understand that. But what I hope women would take away from my story is that you can pivot without apology, that you're allowed to evolve, and that burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's actually a warning sign. So your wellness matters. It's important to stop and really think and identify where you're lacking and what you can work on to bring the most fulfillment to you in that time. We always talk about balance because we're always wearing so many hats, but it's not really balance. It's a rhythm. It's giving the attention to the thing that fills your cup the most in that moment. Not ignoring anything else, but sort of taking things in waves as it comes, because we cannot do it all at once.
You said something really important to me. You said that you had to tap back into who you used to be or what you used to enjoy as you were kind of on this, the day in, the day out. You go to work, you take care of your kid, kind of living for the weekend. I don't even know. Do you have weekends? But like you're living for your time off, your work, work home back and forth, but I love that you reflected and said, let me get back to the things that I used to enjoy. And I think that that's an experience a lot more. I would love to see a lot more women and a lot more people in general just tap back into the things that you enjoyed, or the things that could break up your week or your weekend, or so you're not pausing or holding off on joy. Don't delay your joy. Do the things that make you excited. It's funny because I just had a conversation with my mom, and I was like, I remember taking piano lessons when I was like 12, and I remember like wanting to play piano and asking. I got a keyboard when I was like 12, and I'm like, man, what if I would have like kept up with that, as a kid? I did it for about 2 years, but it made me think like, I wonder if I could get back in the habit of that. I wonder if I could do that as a. So can you speak to how tapping back into the things you once enjoyed could help rebuild your emotional resilience?
Yeah, I'm glad you actually had that conversation, that you even put it out into the world as something that you could possibly get back into. I had a similar conversation with a coworker. She's a nurse, and she said, Shari, I was reading your book. It followed me into the bathroom. I just couldn't put it down. But it really had me coming to thinking, like, what can I do? Like, am I really happy being a nurse? And not that I'm not happy being a nurse, but what can I tap back into that belongs to me, right? So outside of your career. And so we got to talking, and I'm like, well, tell me about the things you enjoyed before. And biking was one of those things. And so I encouraged her, get back into that, because not only will you get back into biking, but maybe you'll find a community in that. Maybe you'll join forces with someone else who likes biking. Maybe you'll have a friend who bikes with you, and then that friend turns into bringing into another friend, and then you have now a whole fleet of bikers. So I feel like, or cyclists, I should say. But, it's important that we tap into the things that we love. I'm not saying it's going to turn into a big business. I'm not saying it's going to turn into a huge community, but it's going to it's going to breathe life into you. It's going to actually improve one of the vital signs of life, which is your oxygen. It's going to help get you back to feeling like yourself again. And when you start getting back into piano lessons, it's going to remind you, it's going to be sort of reminiscent of how you felt as a little girl at 12 when you used to play or used to learn how to play. And that, to me, is profound.